So, what happens when you take a bunch of YouTubers, guys with zero survival training, and strand them on a deserted island? Well, yeah, you get a wild piece of entertainment, but you also get this incredible, unfiltered look at group dynamics, leadership, and what it really takes to survive when the stakes are sky high. Today, we're diving deep into the MrBeast Island Challenge to see what it can teach us about how teams function under the most extreme pressure imaginable.
Right from the jump, as soon as they pushed their boat into the water, this was the mindset. And that single quote, "It's not just for show," it perfectly sums up the crushing psychological weight they were all carrying. Failure wasn't just, not winning. In their minds, it was a life or death situation. And that pressure, it's going to shape every single move they make from here on out. Okay, so let's get into the first part of this. To really get what's going on with the team dynamics, you first have to understand the sheer scale of the challenge. And, maybe more importantly, who these guys were. When you really boil it down, this entire thing comes from a question we've all probably asked ourselves, right? It's that classic what-if scenario. But MrBeast and his crew, they took that hypothetical and just slammed it into reality, putting not just their creativity to the test, but the very strength of their friendships.
And the task itself was absolutely massive. It basically breaks down into 3 huge phases. First up, just survive and find anything useful you can in the piles of trash washed up on shore. Then, somehow, take that garbage and build a real working sailboat. And finally, if they even got that far, they have to navigate miles of dangerous open water. Each one of those steps is a nightmare on its own. So, who were the people taking on this impossible task? Well, this is maybe the most critical piece of the whole puzzle. These guys were not survival experts. They weren't sailors. They were entertainers. Their only expert, Harshi, had only kind of built a boat one time. This wasn't just an experience gap. It was a canyon. Success was going to depend almost entirely on their ability to work together and just figure it out as they went.
All right, let's talk about the build. This phase was the first real, honest-to-goodness test of their teamwork. It wasn't just about hammering stuff together, it was about building a functioning team out of pure chaos, total exhaustion, and a big ol' pile of junk. Pretty early on, something really interesting happened. A classic group dynamic called emergent leadership. Basically, when there's no official boss, the person who knows the most, even if it's not a lot, just naturally becomes the leader. And that was Hase. With that little bit of boat-building know-how, he became the go-to guy, the project manager they desperately needed to even get started. And they were actually pretty smart about it. They didn't just go for the full-size boat right away. Haas whipped up this tiny little prototype from some sticks and a scrap of t-shirt. And when it floated, that was huge. It wasn't just about physics, it was a massive morale boost. It gave them a real plan and the confidence to believe, okay, maybe we can actually pull this off. This is where their creativity just went into overdrive. It's incredible. Every piece of trash became a lifeline. Old barrels? That's our flotation. Bamboo from the jungle? That's the frame. They were literally melting down plastic garbage to mold into paddles and turning a random sheet of metal into a rudder. This is pure innovation born out of having absolutely nothing else.
But all that work, man, it takes a toll. And this moment right here says it all. Chandler is just so completely wiped out that he taps out and tells the cameraman to take over. It's such a raw look at how extreme physical fatigue just breaks you down and forces a team to get creative with who does what. Sometimes you just hit a wall and have to step away. So the boat is built, but now comes the real test. If building it was about their ingenuity, the journey itself was a brutal, punishing test of their physical and mental endurance. Out there on the water, with nothing in sight, is where the team really hit its breaking point.
You can literally watch the crisis unfold in real time here. It starts with just being tired, but it spirals so fast. A couple hours in, seasickness and dehydration are wrecking them. By hour 6, they're starting to argue and fall apart strategically. You see these little moments of hope, like that second wind, but the big picture is just a slow, painful grind towards total system failure over 12 straight hours. And here's a snapshot of just how bad it got halfway through. The team was basically running on fumes. Look at this. Darius and Hase are doing pretty much all the work, carrying the entire mission on their backs. Meanwhile, Jimmy is down for the count with seasickness and Chandler is just completely passed out from exhaustion. That kind of imbalance is just not sustainable. But even in the middle of all that misery, you get these little glimmers of why they're a team in the first place.
This quote, it shows that even with everything going wrong, that shared bond was still there. It's a kind of psychological anchor, that feeling of we're all in this together, and it can be the only thing that keeps a team from completely imploding. And then you get this, a perfect contrast. This is what happens when that morale just shatters under the pressure. It's a flash of real conflict, and it shows how fast that camaraderie can disappear when you're pushed to your absolute limit. This is what pure, unfiltered exhaustion sounds like. So let's be super clear about what's happening here. There is a direct line between physical failure and mental failure. When your body quits, your brain is right behind it. They were literally seeing stars. This wasn't just about sore muscles, it was a total cognitive breakdown for the whole group, making smart, rational decisions almost impossible. They were so close. I mean, agonizingly close. So what went wrong? Why did it ultimately fail? Let's break it down and really look at the anatomy of this near success. You know, failure is rarely ever about just one thing. It's almost always a cascade of problems, a perfect storm. And you can see it here. They had internal issues they were fighting, their own exhaustion, their bad decisions, but then those were slammed by external things they had no control over, like a paddle breaking, and then the absolute killer, the tide turning against them. Half a mile. Just think about that. After all that work, after 12 hours of pure hell on the water, they were half a mile from their goal. And that's when the ocean just said no. At that point, it didn't matter how much willpower they had. They just couldn't beat nature. And what's really telling is how they handled it in the end. There's this sense of shared responsibility. There's no blaming, no finger pointing, just this quiet, collective understanding of how painful that near miss was. It shows a real maturity that as a team, the result belonged to every single one of them. So that kind of leaves us with this final thought. They pushed themselves to the absolute brink, gave it everything they had, and still came up short. It really makes you ask, is this a story about failure, or is it something more? Is it a powerful lesson in just how far we can push ourselves, and where the absolute limits of teamwork and human endurance really are? Something to think about.